Obviously, you see two sides of it. You could get the Kelvin Benjamin side of the coin where, yeah, maybe not that great. But and on the other side of the coin, you could get Josh Allen. And that looks pretty good right now.
Hey, this is Dick DeGroat, Bill's dad, and you're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your host, Andrew and Justin. Go Bills!
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show here on the Built in Buffalo Network. As always, I am your host, Andrew Chang, and alongside me is my co-host, Justin Goddard. Justin, it is the first week of the offseason podcast, and I guess, as always, how are you doing, and how does that make you feel?
A little hollow today, and I was honestly going through the week, and I was like, the whole week I was feeling like, is there like a football game I'm missing? Something. It seems like the time was just flying by and like going slow at the same time when we had a Bills game coming up. But from last Sunday to this Sunday, it felt like a month. And then, we get to like 3 o'clock and I was like, I'm not even going to flip on the game. I'm not ready yet. So I guess long way to say I'm not fully recovered yet, but doing better than this time last week.
That's great. So, much like you, it's Sunday as we're recording this. The AFC Championship game is currently playing, and I was like, all right, I'll turn this on for a little bit, and then I just remembered how upset I was that that the Bills aren't in this game, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to do other things. So I turned it off, and here we are recording now instead. And yes, I guess I'm still a little bitter, but we still have an off-season plan to get to, I guess, in terms of what we're going to deliver you as the listeners. And we're going to start off with, some Bills-related news. And in this episode, we're going to talk about, how Brian Daboll got hired as the Giants head coach, which shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone at this point because we kind of knew that he was leaving. The real interesting news piece is if the Bills are going to retain Ken Dorsey as their offensive coordinator, if he's going to follow suit with Brian Daboll, which it looks like it might happen, but there's not a definitive answer thus far who we think could fill those roles. And then after that, we're going to start a new segment, which should carry us for about 3 months or so. So the plan is to still have a weekly episode. We're going to drop on Mondays. The Thursdays episodes, again, won't happen because we don't have a episode to preview to. You might see Justin lead some episodes. You might see me lead some episodes just so that both of us can catch a little bit of break since it is the off season for both of us. But without further ado, let's get into this first segment. And that's Brian Daboll, as I just mentioned, head coach for the New York Giants. Joe Schoen, GM, former assistant GM to the Buffalo Bills, now running things in New York, which I guess is a good thing, right? I mean, it's a bad thing for continuity aspects, but if you have pieces moving from your organization to another one who's struggling so much like the New York Giants, that's got to make you feel a sense of, I guess, nationalistic is the best way I could put it. If you're a diehard Bills fan, you're like, that's my team. Like, I have people in this building, this organization that is truly wanted in another organization with the hopes that they can turn this ship around because we're sinking. And the first piece was Joe Schoen, and I'm glad that he didn't go anywhere else because I'm glad he went to the NFC, I should say, if anything. And I'm very happy that Brian Daboll didn't take the job in Miami because he was a hot coaching candidate for mainly, for his ability to, develop Josh Allen. Or maybe Josh Allen helped Brian Daboll look a lot better? We don't really know, so we'll know a lot more about that in this next season with Josh Allen without Brian Daboll. But I'm happy for Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, that they were able to, obviously move on to bigger and better gigs. They're in New Jersey now, and I know that they know that. So that is pretty cool for them. But the big area of topic here is Ken Dorsey. And before we get into Ken as the potential offensive coordinator replacement here, why don't you kind of flush out your thoughts about Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll and their new positions with the New York Giants?
Yeah, so at a macro level, I'm happy for them, good for them, and I think this is something that we kind of prepared for last year, so we were definitely expecting it this year. I think most people this time last year weren't really expecting to have the same coaching staff together. So I think this is one of the things that marks you as a good organization, where you're having so much success that people want to kind of take a slice of the pie and try to replicate that on their end. I think the next step for the Bills organization will tell kind of a lot about the future of the Bills. On this is where great teams are made, and this is where you see the coaching trees and the GM trees start as those players get their promotions and go elsewhere to try to lead their own franchises. What are we able to do to replace those pieces? And that kind of gets to, is it Ken Dorsey or is he on the way out the door too? Personally, Joe Schoen he's one that I didn't really want to see go. I think he's been kind of a low-key big piece to this front office. But as far as Brian Daboll goes, I'm kind of on the fence about, the positives and the negatives of that. As you kind of mentioned, he gets a lot of credit for his development of Josh Allen, and I think these circumstances are ones where, yes, the coaching had a part of it, but I think a guy like Josh Allen, the biggest piece to his development was Josh Allen. I think number two to that, I would probably say Jordan Palmer working with him in the off seasons and Josh seeking out his help. So while I think that for the first few years of Josh's career, it was kind of like Daboll pulling him up with him, I think we've kind of gotten to a point where Josh was elevating Daboll, and we could see similar success with a different coordinator. There was definitely some really good game plans from Daboll this year, and definitely a few shows afterwards that we were kind of scratching our heads. So I think if we just get a coordinator in that, realizes what he has in Josh Allen and the weapons on the field, there's a good chance that we don't really see much of a drop-off at all in the offense next year.
One of the things that I noticed with Brian Daboll is that he's kind of like one of two ways, right, when you kind of look back at his performance. That I'll just say this, right off the bat when he came to Buffalo, the one thing I noticed right off the bat was like, okay, well, at least he's willing to try things. Try different things, different looks, different formations, and whatnot. And he also included Josh's input in the play calls, which was really cool because it built up this trust and foundation between the coordinator and the quarterback, and we saw the benefits of that. So that's really interesting and all. But at the other side of things, sometimes you saw a lack of adjustment. And the most recent example I could think of is, and I really don't want to hash up this scar, but, running the ball 3 times in a row when clearly it wasn't working. Taking the ball out of your best player's hand in the most important game of the year, which I argue if the Bills would have won against the Kansas City Chiefs and made it to the AFC Championship against the Bengals, I'd still probably argue that matchup against the Chiefs was probably a little more intense, and that's just a random claim. That's no disrespect to the Bengals, but I just think that the Chiefs are a harder matchup, at least at this point. And who knows? Maybe the Bengals, I mean, they're playing right now. Maybe the Bengals end up beating the Chiefs, and that'd be a crazy way to do it. But when I think of the bad times with Brian Daboll, it's just like, oh my God, man, like, where is the adjustment? Where is this? But that's not to take away from this main point. And that's the fact that Ken Dorsey, where does he go? It's reported that he's either going to be the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, and it's not put out there, but Josh Allen said, there's one person who I'd really, really like to be the offensive coordinator, and I mean, who else is he talking about? Chad Hall? Probably not. It's definitely Ken Dorsey, the quarterback's coach. And Brian Daboll allegedly agreed to be a head coach with this idea that the Giants were going to get Ken Dorsey to be the offensive coordinator for the New York Giants, a package deal. As of right now, Ken Dorsey hasn't decided. It's like, is he going to go to New York? Is he going to stay in Buffalo? I guess the biggest factor here would be money, and it looks like the Bills might get into a bidding war for Ken Dorsey. Justin, if you're the Bills, do you pay Ken Dorsey whatever he wants to stay in Buffalo?
I mean, I would explore kind of what the value is at this point, but I'm also looking at this as like the decision for Dorsey, if it's coming down to, following Dable to make more money or staying in Buffalo and kind of inheriting that offense. That's kind of a thing where you're chasing dollars or you're chasing championships right now to me. And
that's another thing I really want to talk about real quick. You're offensive coordinator and you want to go to Daniel Jones over Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. What? Like, I don't know. I just don't really see the, money aside, like, why would you pick Daniel Jones and company versus Josh Allen and company? Just saying.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's kind of where my curiosity comes with Dorsey. I understand, some of these jobs are hard to get and whatnot, and the money that comes with that. So you got to kind of take your paydays when you can. But from my perspective, if your goal as a coach is to eventually make it to a head coaching ranks, do you have a better chance of sticking in Buffalo and taking over that offense versus kind of the project that you're going to have to undertake with Dable in New York? And yeah, they might be looking to bring in a different quarterback or roll with things, but from the sounds of it, and there's a lot of coach speak this time of the year, but it sounds like Daboll's excited to work with Daniel Jones. So for me personally, to answer your original question, are you kind of giving Dorsey a blank check? I don't think so. And I know there's no salary cap on coaches and coordinators and whatnot, but at the same time, I think part of the reward of staying in Buffalo should also be the opportunity that you're kind of being just handed versus the uphill climb that you're going to have with the Giants.
Okay, let me reword my question. Do you want Ken Dorsey to be the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills?
Yes, and I think if you're losing Dable and you're losing that little bit of continuity, having somebody that was working under him is familiar with, not just the players on the field, but how they tick off the field, the type of chemistry they have. Obviously, when people are coming out and advocating for him, like, they're going to ride with him. That's their guy versus bringing in one guy from outside the organization that kind of has to do a feeling out process, and now we're installing a completely different playbook versus kind of working off of what was already in place. Yes, I'm all for promoting from within. I think Dorsey's done plenty to earn it. My only real hesitation is he's never actually been a play caller. But I think that's kind of something where you work with Josh and the offensive pieces, and you've been watching Dable, and there might be a little bit of growing pains, but you got number 17, you can overcome a lot.
Not to mention, Josh has the ability to go to the line, read defenses, and to check into other plays. There have been plenty of times and examples with Josh and Brian Daboll working together, and Josh goes line and goes like, no, I don't really like this. Let me do this instead. And Daboll's like, okay. I mean, what is he going to do? Yell in Josh's ear like, no, go back, you idiot. Like, no, like, come on. Josh has full autonomy of this offense, and they work together. So let's say that, well, let me bridge this in a little better. Have you ever watched How I Met Your Mother?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, you know when Lily and Marshall are, I guess Marshall kind of learns the concept of reaching and settling, and he thinks that he's the reacher and Lily is the settler?
Mm-hmm.
Are we potentially reaching for Ken Dorsey, or are we potentially settling for Ken Dorsey? And we talked about the, reaching because we want him back. We want him retained. But let's, play devil's advocate. Let's say that, we just know that Ken Dorsey might not be the best option out there. There are other options out there, which this is true. If we settle for Ken Dorsey, what are we giving up in order to get Ken Dorsey? Let's explore some potential options that are out there. And not saying that these are my number one go-tos, but, there are some really interesting names out there. And I'm not going to pick people within the organization just because I don't think anyone's necessarily that experienced enough. Maybe Chad Hall, but he's a really young guy who just got to wide receivers coach maybe a year or two ago, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe. I'm thinking of maybe bringing someone else in, maybe a former head coach, if we can't bring Ken Dorsey in or back, and he goes to the Giants. Maybe someone like a Doug Peterson, who got a lot of juice out of Carson Wentz, and he was part of that Carson Palmer offense out in Arizona. And I understand things kind of fell apart with the Eagles his last year there, but that is a name that'd be kind of interesting to me. Who do you have on your list if we can't get Ken Dorsey, and that you would be interested in the Bills kind of, I guess, looking into?
So I think Doug Peterson is also, for me, probably the most intriguing. My pause there is kind of fresh off of a head coaching gig. It's kind of like the old adage.
He took a year off.
Yeah.
He took a year off.
But still pretty fresh. Just kind of like the old adage of like too many chefs spoil the soup. It's kind of like, how is he going to mesh with McDermott being head coach? And
well, they both worked in Philly under Andy Reid.
Yes. And so this one, my particular thought process there is kind of hard for me to answer because I don't know them at a personal level. Doug Peterson could come in and have the utmost respect for McDermott and be like, hey, man, this is your show. I'm just over here doing my thing. But I could see a potential kind of, I'm used to being in charge, and a little bit of personality clashing there. I feel like, to your reaching and settling point there, I do think that there's a chance that trying to retain Dorsey is the settling option, and I only say that in that there are former head coaches out there. There's up and coming offensive coordinators. There's just some different options that you could have, and we don't really know that Dorsey's that guy yet. We're kind of like a Brandon Beane draft, We're betting on the upside and hoping he develops into that. I do honestly feel like he's probably grown pretty close with Dable, and if he wasn't seriously considering the Giants job, I think it would have been shut down right away. So I'm fully expecting to lose Dorsey, and honestly, I would have to say Peterson's my hottest candidate out there. I've seen some strange names get thrown around, and like Adam Gase got thrown in there.
Oh,
not that.
Yeah, and we're gonna quickly move on to the next segment here. But Adam Gase, think about where he came from. He was the quarterback guru. He had Peyton Manning in Denver, and then he gets his shot in Miami. And with the power of hindsight, who had really elevated who? Was it Peyton Manning elevating Adam Gase, or Adam Gase elevating Peyton Manning? I think we all know the answer here. And I'm not saying that this is the same thing, but maybe we're looking at a potential similar situation. Maybe Brian Daboll doesn't have that same success without Josh Allen. And not saying that he's a bad coordinator, not saying anything like that, because Brian Daboll did plenty of good things for the Buffalo Bills. It's just Josh Allen's a specimen. And if you don't have that specimen on your team, it makes playing football out of script that much harder. So we're going to take a quick break, but, stick around because we got a very interesting segment to get to, which we're going to carry on for the next couple of weeks. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Dick DeGroat, Bill's dad. Now back to the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast. I am your host, Andrew Chang, and my co-host here is Justin Goddard. You can find us on most social media and podcasting platforms, and even on YouTube by searching up the Wandering Buffalo podcast. You can find Justin at jgods22, and you can find me at 2changs. And we got to talk about our new segment here, which is going to carry us on for the next 12 weeks. This will be week 1 of 13. So, and if you can kind of get where I'm going, is that the last 13 seconds of that Kansas City Chief game, and I don't want to bring up scars, right? I don't want to bring up something that was fairly recent, but that sucked. It really sucked. What I really enjoyed, though, was how Josh Allen, and he had a quote that said, like, yes, this hurts right now, it stings, but you can't, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't know the quote exactly, but he said something along the lines, you gotta like what the future holds for us in this, this team. And this segment is 13 reasons to be excited for the Buffalo Bills. So here's week 1 of 13. And we're just going to carry this for as long as we can, obviously, into the 13 weeks. And after each week, we're not going to do repeats, and we're just going to go for it. So, Justin, I'm going to pick the first reason for us to be excited, 1 of 13. And I'm hard-pressed for you to disagree with me on this point, but I'm going to say I'm most optimistic. Reason number 1 is Brandon Beane.
Okay.
I could have gone player here, could have gone coach, but I'm going straight to the top with Brandon Beane. And I'll tell you why I'm picking Brandon Beane as number 1. And there's no order of like, oh, he's the most important reason and number 13 isn't. Like, I'm just picking reasons. Like, there's no hierarchy on this list. Just reasons in general. But I watched that 71 or 2 minute exit interview that he had with the media, and he opened it off by saying, like, you could just feel the emotion in his voice. I'm really sorry we couldn't get it done. Like, we got home at like 3 a.m. and there's Bills Mafia at the airport, and I just felt sick to my stomach. I was fully expecting boos. I wanted to boo at me. but you guys just came out and was cheering, and he said he wanted to get everyone hugs and that he was truly sorry that the team couldn't get it done, and he was just very candid, and it was refreshing to see that kind of level of emotion with someone of Brandon Beane's caliber, because as the GM, he's realistically a businessman. But it was great to see that he was human at the same time. And when he was asked all these hard questions like, hey, what are we going to do with, Mario Addison or Emmanuel Sanders? He didn't say like, yeah, we'll they're not coming back or something. He said, if it makes sense, we'll talk to him, but the money has to make sense. And when he got asked questions about Cole Beasley, he's like, yeah, I would fully anticipate him being back. You could listen to his responses, and if you were paying attention enough, you got the answer that you need to hear from Brandon Beane in all 71 minutes, which is great. Now, he also said he's not going to be a big, spender in free agency because the Bills don't have that much cap space. And he said he's probably going to have to move some numbers around, which is something he doesn't want to do. But he will probably have to do it to make this team competitive. But all in all, I'm just really optimistic of Brandon Beane's leadership of the Buffalo Bills, because he's just an honest dude. Like, he's an honest dude, and I feel like I can connect with him, even though I've never met the man. And he's financially responsible. He understands that if he moves contracts around, or that he can't retain certain people back just to bring them back, and the value has to be there, and he's so aware that everything needs to be a calculated decision in order for it to make sense for the Buffalo Bills to be successful in the future.
So a lot there, but very well said. And I like your first answer of Brandon Beane here. And I think that last year, post-draft, there was a lot of talk of, well, what did he do to make the Bills better this year? And, yeah, we got some good pieces that should be able to develop and help us maybe 2-3 years down the line, but we're right on the cusp of the Super Bowl. How are we getting over the hump this year? And with the results of the season, it's kind of still easy to argue that point, but what I like about Brandon Beane is, like you said, in the press conference, yes, him as a businessman is a different person, but also seeing him up there as just like, at the same time, like another emotionally invested Bills fan with a lot more at stake. So a lot of criticism last year for double dipping at the defensive end position. Well, easy to have that criticism going into a season where we had, as much depth as we did. But now you get to this year and, what's going to happen with Jerry Hughes? What's going to happen with Mario Addison? Those are two very key pieces on the defense that were getting 40-50% of the snaps, and there's a chance that one or both of them are gone. So you could have been going into this free agency, this draft, having another 2 holes to fill. And what I really like about Brandon Beane is, you're talking about his fiscal responsibility, and you see, kind of, we might get upset in the moment that, we wanted a stud cornerback too. Like, for example, that's something I was looking for in the draft. But I think he's kind of determined that as long as he has Josh Allen as his quarterback, that Super Bowl window is open. So it's kind of, what can we do to keep the rest of the team around him competing? And then you kind of see the polar opposite of the Los Angeles Rams team right now. If I was a fan of the Rams, I would be scared shitless after this season, because they're really toying with the kind of the idea that the salary cap is made up and you can push money around and blah blah blah. But I mean, they're moving all their draft picks to do it. They're spending money like crazy and restructuring and kicking things down the road. That all comes to a head at some point, and whether it's this year, 2 years, 3 years, it's going to come to get them in the meantime. So it's kind of how many years of your franchise do you want to mortgage on going for it all for 1 or 2 years of Super Bowl? And yeah, I would love to be watching the Bills lift the trophy at the end of the year. But I think I would also, at the same time, rather know that we have a chance to be competitive for 10 years versus mortgaging it all on a 2 to 3 year window.
Yeah, where that 2 to 3 window isn't guaranteed.
Right.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. Because, part of initially I was like, well, if the Bills could win a Super Bowl next year and we go to 10 years of, previous, like pre-Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane era, I'm thinking to myself, like, well, maybe that deal look a little sweeter and sweeter every minute.
Yeah, it's a spicy idea, but you're looking at, it's working out for them this year.
Super Bowl gang.
What if you have Matthew Stafford go down week 1 of next year?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you at now? And you don't have like any draft capital to continue building the team around him, so you're going to have to just keep spending money on free agents, and
yeah,
it's a tough cycle.
Yes, it is, and I'm, going back to your point. This is why I personally wanted Brandon Beane to be one of 13 reasons why we should be optimistic for the Buffalo Bills. He is smart. Big Baller Beane is smart. And, we have the power of hindsight, and I'll just go over this real quickly. But, some of these contracts that he handed out, such as the John Feliciano one, maybe not looking too hot right now, but he can also get cut after this season. Then you look at Darrell Williams, like, he's kind of getting tackle money for a guard position, and not looking that great. Also, that can get fixed and resolved real quickly. But let's take a step back. 1 year ago, when Brandon Beane was able to re-sign John Feliciano, and we were like, oh, we got him back. And then we got, we signed what we thought was the answer at right tackle, which was Darrell Williams. And we were so infatuated. We were like, oh, we got the line back. The gang's getting back together. This is great. Josh Allen's going to have ultimate protection. And then what does Brandon Beane do right after that? And I don't know if it's in this exact order, but you're getting the idea. Then he brings Matt Milano back. Boom. He brought back so many people. Isaiah McKenzie, Levi Wallace, all these people. And that's what we wanted as Bills fans. He got us, and from what he knew at the time, in the direction where we needed to go. And with the power of hindsight, yes, could we have gotten better in certain areas, or should we have handed out different contracts? Yeah, probably, but I don't think any of those were bad contracts, and I still don't think any of these are bad contracts. And if they are, Brandon Beane is smart enough to build himself an exit door. Like if this is a highway analogy, he's got an exit ramp for each year. He's smart like that. So that's why I'm really excited and opportunistic of what he can do with the Buffalo Bills in their future. But Justin, I'll let you wrap up here, and then I think we're getting out of here, all right?
Yeah, just one of the other things I really like about Brandon Beane is he's not afraid to take the swings at the plate. We've seen him have some misses, and it's the NFL. Like, every GM, team, organization takes swings on situations that don't work out. But what we've really seen from him, one of the first ones was bringing in Kelvin Benjamin. And I don't know about you, I was pretty hyped that Kelvin Benjamin was coming to town. And
I was very excited.
It was, a big-bodied receiver, catch radius, all the things that went with it.
1,000-yard rookie year season.
Yeah, and it was really exciting to bring in a player that had kind of that pedigree that we hadn't really seen GMs make the move for. And that was a dumpster fire. It went terribly. It ended up being a horrible decision. But you know what? He cut bait. He got out of that. He got Benjamin off the team. And we've seen that with other, the draft pick of Zay Jones not working out. Well, we missed this one and got him out of town.
That was McDermott, though. That was McDermott's pick.
True. They're in lockstep, so I'm going to give that one to. I'll give that one to Beane anyways. But the other thing I really like about Beane is kind of being ahead of the curve. And yes, he's had some misses in free agency, and I'm thinking of like Trent Murphy, Vernon Butler, kind of trying to bring in these guys to fill a role. But also at the same time, his drafting and letting players develop and then rewarding them with an extension. I think that's something that's underrated because the guys on the team see this happening and they're like, oh, okay, they appreciate what we're doing here. Players are getting extended early and it's like, hey man, thanks for your hard work. We're going to lock you up. And not only do I think that's great for like the team and the locker room and the morale, but I think it's also has a sneaky advantage fiscally of, we see Trey White get his extension, and I believe he was the highest paid cornerback in the league for like an hour.
2 seconds.
And then,
let's do this before Jalen Ramsey or,
Jalen Ramsey
Byron Murphy.
And Lattimore came, I think it was in the same day. So not only did he have that benefit of kind of rewarding one of his guys ahead of the curve, but you also saved I think it was like $4 or $5 million annually just by getting it done early. So it's kind of a win-win in that situation, and I think that's something that doesn't really get talked about enough with Beane.
Yeah, he's very tactful. And before we get out of here, you brought up Kelvin Benjamin, and I think this is a good way to segue it out of this segment. Brandon Beane gave a third-round pick for Kelvin Benjamin. Brandon Beane traded his way up to number 7 to get Josh Allen. And I remember thinking at the time with both of those, acquisitions to get, Josh Allen or Kelvin Benjamin, all I could think to myself at that moment was, this is encouraging because he's swinging for the fences. He's going for it. Obviously, you see two sides of it. You could get the Kelvin Benjamin side of the coin where, yeah, maybe not that great. But and on the other side of the coin, you get Josh Allen. And that looks pretty good right now. You got the one that was most important, right? And that's not to say that he won't get more right down the road, but he'll probably get some wrong ones down the road too. But what's really encouraging for me is that he's willing to swing for the fences, and that's a great way to end this episode. So thanks for listening to another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show here on the Built-in Buffalo Network. Again, you can find our episodes dropping in the off-season on Mondays. Justin, where can the people find you?
You can find me on any social medias at jgods22.
And you can find me on social media accounts by searching up 2Jangs. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Catch us next week where we talk about reason number 2 to be excited for the Buffalo Bills. Upcoming season or seasons, really. And if you're interested in joining our show, feel free to reach out to us on our social media and podcasting platforms, and even on YouTube by searching up the Wandering Buffalo podcast. Thank you for listening. It's been a crazy, regular season, but a lot to go over in the off season. So thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. And of course, and as always,
go Bills.